Hey, what's going on, guys? Gdoggcasey here, bringing you the CTL Week 2 All Inspiration Results video. This is a video where we just go over the games here, and then I can let you know who wins, even though you can already see that based on the graphic on the screen. We're going to go over the games and just talk about the week a little bit and set ourselves up nicely for Week 3. So starting the week off, we had set 1 with Sinistar versus End to End, and that was a ZVP where Sinistar went for a nifty little 2-base swarm host push that completely surprised End to End, and actually ticked them off a little bit because I guess it is kind of like a cheesy play, but it ended up getting Sinistar the win, and it was a fun game to watch, so go check that one out. Game number 2, or set number 2, was between Shadver versus Bees, and that was a PVZ where Bees opened up with a 9 pool against Shad's Nexus first, and he just kind of overran him with Zerglings, and it was a quick game, and it was a little bit tough for Shadver because he lost based on a build order choice, and it just didn't go too well for him. So 1-1 right now for the week. And in set number 3, we had our Revelator versus CT6's Anti. And that game was interesting because it was a PVZ. Revelator was doing everything right up to the point where he sent an observer over Anti's army, saw several roaches there, but I guess maybe he wasn't looking at the map, or I don't know, like he wanted to get a Colossus out, but he didn't make any Immortals in time, and he ended up just losing to a very well-timed roach push from Anti. So that was a bit unfortunate, and it actually gave CT6 EU the 2-1 lead there. So then we kick off game number 4 with Gdoggcasey, myself, versus Zukaman, and it was my first game for All Inspiration. I was so nervous for it, but I practiced really hard. I scouted Zukaman's build order in the previous week, found out he liked to go for an Immortal Sentry push, but he was a little bit late with the timing, so I just made sure I had a lot of units before him and pushed, and I ended up just breaking down the wall and winning that game. So that was good, a lot of fun, and it ties up the week 2-2. Next off, we had game number 5 between Operator and DT Legend. That was a TVZ where DT Legend went for this roach push with some speedlings too, I think, but it was pretty poorly executed, to be honest. I'm not trying to down talk anybody here, but if you look at the game, you can see the roaches went to the right spot, but then they didn't go up the ramp, and they ended up going to another location and then back to another. It basically just was a very delayed attack. And by the time it actually came, Operator had way more than enough forces, since he was basically working off one base that whole time, because he had scouted the attack coming, and he just crushed it and then just ended the game. So good job by Operator there, and it actually gives us the lead 3-2. So in set number 6, we had Canary versus CT6 Awake. That was a game, that was another TVC actually. Canary held off a very nice Baneling bust, and it was actually a nice hold because the Baneling bust was pretty well executed. But he held that off, and it turned out to transition into a very long macro game where Canary was doing a great job, but then all of a sudden Awake just macroed up this max army of Banelings, Zerglings, and Mutas, and literally just swarmed over Canary, and all of a sudden the game was lost, and it was a tough loss for Canary. But it tied up the weekly matchup here 3-3. So that set us up for set number 7 with our Acadian versus Shinobu, and that was a really fun game to watch because Acadian actually opened up with a very nice DT rush, but Shinobu responded with lightning quick reflexes, canceling the Immortal just before it was finished, chrono boosting out an Observer, and held it off nicely, which then ended up transitioning into a very good macro game where Acadian ended up switching up his style, going for Void Rays, and that was what did it for him, and he ended up winning the game in the end, getting us the 4-3 lead. After that, we had set 8 with Einerjar versus 1 HP for the win, and what he did there, that was a ZVZ where Einerjar had initially looked like he was going to start off with a Speedling kind of Baneling attack, but then decided to switch it up into a Roach play. And the interesting thing about that game was that 1 HP for the win seemed to be going for that Roach play right from the start, but somehow Einerjar managed to out-macro him and make more Roaches, and end up just pushing into the base and winning with Roaches. So good job by Einerjar, and that actually clinched the win for us with a 5-3 lead, but we still had the ace match to play with P. Sosa versus North Quab, and that was a very good best of 3. It went to all 3 games. In game number 1, North Quab just overpowered P. Sosa with some really strong mech play with 3-3 upgrades, and it was just way too much for P. Sosa to hold off. Even though he did a great job macroing behind everything, it was just too strong of an army. In game number 2, North Quab went for a proxy Reaper rush, which was held off beautifully by P. Sosa and ended up giving him the edge to eventually win the game with excellent army positioning. There was a couple of flanks in that game that were just beautiful to watch, and P. Sosa easily took game number 2. So that set us up with game number 3, which North Quab just went back to what worked, and he went back to a strong mech style. P. Sosa scattered it earlier, and he had a much better response to it, and actually ended up turning this into a base race scenario, but unfortunately, the Brood Lords and the Swarm Host from P. Sosa just didn't do damage fast enough to be able to kill off all of North Quab's army and his base, where North Quab's Thors and tanks and everything were just destroying P. Sosa, so he ended up losing that one in the end. But it didn't matter because we actually took the win that week with a 5-4 victory against CT6 EU. It was a well-fought match. It was exciting all the way through, so make sure you check out all those games. And stay tuned for next week. We have week 3 coming up shortly. Thanks, guys.